Last week I did a video on how to make some fake winter berries, and what I thought I'd do is show you a variation of that today along with a tree decoration that I want to do. It's the usual trick: you get tin foil and wire, you make it into a ball and then you dip it into wax, except this time I added flour to the wax. It means you don't have to dip the tin foil into the wax as often to make it completely impossible to see the tin foil going through, though I did do a variation, some that you can still see the tin foil and some where you couldn't, and then eventually dip them into sugar to get that lovely frosted ice crystal look on it as well. I've also been making some orange twirls. Again, I have a video on this, and one of the DIYs that I tried to do and I had filmed but ended miserably was trying to make some window stencils, because I didn't like that spray paint snow that you can get. I remember I tried it one year. It was a nightmare to remove and I got a really bad allergic reaction to it. So my idea was that I was going to draw some designs, make some stencils with some yogurt lids, and then with a mixture of flour, water and sugar, I was going to try and make these patterns on the window. But they looked horrific. Even my camera didn't want to focus on them, so that didn't work. But today I'm going to show you something which did work, and I was very, very pleased with it, and I think I will be making a few different ones of this. And that was to use some plants to make a really beautiful little tree fairy. I'm going to be using Honesty, and I'm also going to be using some maple leaves. I have this little mould of a baby. I think if you've been following this channel for about 2 years, you will have seen me make some Christmas tree decorations with this previously. For the wings, what I used was an old tea light. There are so many different ways for you to make some very, very beautiful wings, but today I'll just stick with the Honesty and the maple leaves. I ended up re-sculpting the baby a little bit because it just came out a little rough. I made it so that the baby looked like it was smiling, and once that was all done, I started collecting the leaves. The trick is to try and find some which are the same size. It can take a bit of time, but eventually you will find some. Wait for them to dry, and then once you've picked that out, it's time to start painting the baby. I'm going to be using up these 2 paints that my husband bought a while ago, and I desperately need to use them up because otherwise they're just going to go to waste. I'm going to be mixing some white and green with a tiny bit of gold, and I'm going to be layering this a lot. I'm just going to put a tiny amount of gold in with that paint for the moment, so you get a small amount of metallic shimmer. And then, like I said before, there's going to be a lot of layering to this. So don't worry about it at first, just get that baby one uniform colour, and then we're going to start adding other colours on top of it. For the highlights, I'm going to be using a very pale mint green and then using my fingers just to stipple that. You could use a brush if you want. And the main place I'm going to be using that is on the face and the hair. I want to highlight the way the eyes are all scrunched together and the mouth as well, so you can really see that he's smiling in his sleep. And then I'm also going to be using some of that copper bronze colour. I'm going to be watering it down so that it's very, very weak. I don't want this to be very obnoxious. I want to make it look like a little copper baby that got left out and then started to get aged with the wind and the rain, so you get that lovely mixture of green and mossy green, and then that bronze colour which still comes through, which looks so, so beautiful. So that's going to go on all the highlights. Then using a darker green, I'm going to be using that on all the crevices on the baby, so behind the ear, on that little gap in between the arm and the stomach, around the feet, anywhere where there's a dip in the clay, just add that dark green and then blend the edges. Now to make the baby look more weathered, I want to add a bit of a mossy pattern onto the skin, so I'm going to be using a variation of 3 different colours: a dark green, a green which is a little bit darker than the first colour we used to paint the baby, and then one which is the lightest of all of them. That is going to look white in comparison to the darker colours that it's layered on top of, but it's not a white, it's more of a very pale mint green. It's just that the contrast makes it look paler than it actually is. I'm also going to add some gold with that in between all of the green and keep speckling that on top of all the other layers underneath. Now for my favourite part, adding the wings. I'm going to take those maple leaves and I'm going to paint them gold while they're drying, and once I've made sure that I've really gotten into every single part of that leaf and painted both sides, I'm going to start playing around with the honesty. First thing to do is cut it off the stalk and then cut off the part at the top that sticks out. I'm sure there's a technical term for this, but I don't know it, so I can't use it. And then what I'm going to do is add some green. If it's just stuck like this onto the back of the ferry, while it will look okay, I don't think it works because it looks too clean and neat compared to the rest of the ferry, and I want some of that green to end up on the base as well. I just found it made it look better, so I'm going to be adding a combination of that very pale mint green and then the darker green, stippling it with my fingers onto the base. And then we need to cut the maple leaf at an angle so that we can have the wings sticking out on an angle. If you want to, you could have it pointing in a completely different direction. You could have it so it points upright or even more angled so that it's kind of flat against the baby's back. It's up to you. Just cut it the way you want it and then stick the two leaves together and then put it at the angle that you want on the back of the ferry. You could use any kind of glue. You could use super glue. I'm going to be using hot glue just because I have an industrial quantity of this and I'm trying to use it up. So I'll stick that down and then start adding more paint to get it to blend into the ferry very naturally and organically. With the next DIY I have planned for another tree ferry, I'm not going to be having it on a cloud like this one. Instead, I'm going to have it on a nest. But for today, for this one, I'm going to be doing a cloud. You want to take a cotton ball, rip that up in a million different directions so that it doesn't just look perfectly round and neat. If you have something a little bit pointy, like a pair of scissors or even a needle, just try and use that to really tear up all the cotton and loosen it up. It will make the cloud a lot more interesting looking than if it's just neatly wound into a ball. And then either using super glue or hot glue, stick the ferry down onto that. I'm also going to be painting around the wings a little bit. While I do have that little streak of gold going down the back, I would also like to add some green just because I'm worried it looks too neat if there's this lovely neat line of gold on the back. Instead, I'm going to take some water, mix it in with the green paint so that it's more liquidy and will settle into all the cracks, and then add that along the edge of the maple leaf as well. And that's it, I'm done. If you like my content and want to follow me on Patreon, that's where you can find my early content, extra content, and see the thought process behind things like my books, cover designs, videos, and artwork. You can also find me on Instagram, but the best place to follow me and make sure that all my new content is sent directly to you is through my website and the mailing list. On the top right-hand corner, you put your name, the email you want your new content to be sent to, and that's it. You're done.